Hello and welcome back to the Property and Lending Show. As always, I've got Fadi with me. Mark's not here because he's too good for us this week. So Fadi's going to take over the interesting tip of the week, and then we're going to get into the show real quickly today. We've got a really cool guest, but we'll get to that in a sec. Fadi, do you have a interesting tip for the week?
I think it's flavor of the month or flavor for the last couple of months that we've got this week. Just in regards to staying in contact with your broker or bank, we're seeing a lot of retention coming from our customers in regards to finding the best rate possible, or are they on the best rate possible? Something that Mark and I, or Power Loans in general, will be doing in the next couple of weeks is sending out group messages to existing customers, future customers, friends and family, anyone that's listening to the podcast. If you're looking, or even if you want to see if you're on the best interest rate possible, get in contact with us. We'll generate a product comparison for you. What that product comparison basically is, it gives you 3 or 4 lenders with lower rates that you're currently on at the moment, including the rate that you should be on with your current lender. If customers were to contact their current lender to try and negotiate those rates down, sweet. It's obviously easier to go for your current lender to get that done instead of doing the whole refinance process. If not, get back in contact with us and let's see what we can do for you. So it's all about staying in contact with your broker or your bank and always push for the cheapest interest rate. Something that all of us do on a daily basis, whether it's our best mobile plan, best car insurance, best home insurance, best utilities, number one investment in Australia is your home loan. So that should be the number one you should be looking to start saving money on.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Now, we have a very special guest. Every week, our guests get cooler and cooler. So, picking my words. So I don't offend someone else.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, all our guests are amazing. This week, we've got Principal Solicitor from RS Law Group, Rania. Rania, welcome to the Property and Lending Show. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you guys for having me on board.
That's okay. That's okay. Rania, we actually went to school together a long time ago.
Yes.
Fadi, were you at the same school as well?
I remember when I first got in contact with Rania, or Rania got in contact with me. I remember her face from school, but obviously I'm a lot more older than both of you. So I do remember when she was younger.
I don't think anyone can ever forget our school.
Yeah.
No, it was yeah, if you want to get into the property industry, you got to go to this school, and sets you up for life. Rania, thank you so much for coming on. Last episode we were speaking about apartments and what the lending world looked like when it came to apartments, as well as apartments versus houses. And so we thought we'd continue the apartment theme this week, and obviously it's more than just apartments, but a lot of it is linked to apartments, and we'll talk about Strata. And you're obviously a Strata specialist, but before we get into that, do you want to just let us, or let the people listening know, who you are, what's your company, and why did you get into law?
Yep. So my name is Rania Shishati. I am the principal owner and solicitor at RS Law Group. I set up my business early this year, and I've been a lawyer for about 8 years now. I got into law because I like to argue a lot. I always like, and I also like to help people. And I find that there is always a difficulty out there for people battling issues, whether it's a legal issue or whether it's a family related issue. So having a really good lawyer that can understand not just what you're going through, but can also understand your values and help you throughout the legal process, it's very rewarding and it's very helpful. The fact that, when I call a client and I say, hey, your property's settled, you can now move into your dream home, I feel that happiness for them, and I feel that passion for them, and knowing that I can put my services towards that is really, really rewarding. And yeah, I love to help people.
Yeah, amazing. It's a good reason to get into law. So you didn't get into law, like you didn't watch Suits or something and think this is what I want to do. right?
No,
You actually had a love for. Okay, I just wanted to
no.
ask.
I actually wanted to be a flight attendant in my younger days, but
Yeah,
my dad said, no, you've got to get married, get a husband, have kids. You can't have that when you're up in the air all the time. So,
yeah,
yeah, so I settled for law. Makes sense now.
yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. I'll ask the first question, and then we'll just let the conversation flow. If you got anything, just jump in. I'm going to ask the real, probably basic question. What is Strata?
Strata. Okay. Strata is a form of ownership of a property. So in New South Wales, we have what's called Torrens title. So that's ownership of things like houses and land. We also have what's called strata title. So when you own strata, you don't actually own everything in the property that you are buying or living in. You own what's called the cubic space inside your lot, and then anything that's outside that cubic space or anything that is in the exterior of your lot is actually common property. And then it's owned by what's called an owner's corporation. So all the owners that buy into Strata, whether it's an apartment or whether it's a townhouse, they form what's called an owner's corporation. So if things like the plumbing or the gutters or the roofs, they need to be fixed, or there's defects that need to be fixed. It's not just one owner that's fixing it, it's the owners collectively fixing it at the same time.
And is that run by the person that owns, I don't know if so much owns the complex? Like, let's say, for example, an apartment block. The builder, for example, we had a customer that he built an apartment block and he sold all the units off, and he's actually the strata manager for the apartment block, or takes care of the strata from the apartment block. Is there ever a scenario where the tenants in there overthrow that person? They believe they can do things cheaper, they're paying too much, because obviously, as we all know, strata goes up on a yearly basis. That person that's actually built, is there any way of removing him? And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because there's so many scenarios where we go visit clients at their apartment blocks and there's not really much but an elevator and a garden outside, which is, I think, pretty easily maintainable. Obviously, if the plumbing and all of that, everyone can get in contact with a plumber.
Yeah.
But is there any other scenario in your experience where that's actually happened?
We've had cases where owners complain about strata managers not getting back to them. They don't reply to them. They go weeks and weeks without even a simple reply email saying, I'll call you or I'll message you about this. So when this becomes a collective theme amongst all the owners together have a meeting and they vote to terminate that strata manager and appoint a new strata manager instead. So yes, it can be done. There is a little bit of a process to go through, because you do have to call a meeting and go through the strata managing agents agreement and see if you can do that, if there's any break fees involved, and obviously have one appointed at the time as well to take over the management of the common property.
I just asked to take it back. We jumped into that pretty quick. Got complicated straight away. I was going to ask, I want to break it down for people, because a lot of people don't know what strata is. And if you've never lived in an apartment complex, or if you've never had a strata, you probably won't know what strata is. So you mentioned strata, there's a bit of a combined ownership of something, and therefore you build this strata, or this, you call it the owner's corporation, and and they're in charge of fixing and maintaining this common stuff.
Common property,
Common property, yeah. So what is the difference between the owner's corporation and what Fadi mentioned there, being a strata manager? So how does this all work? Like, if myself, yourself, and Fadi owned, 3 units in a complex, how would that example play out?
Owner's corporation is all the owners. So if you live in a complex of 4 owners, that's 4 people in owner's corporation. A strata manager is a person like a property manager that's just appointed to look after the common property for you. that's appointed to get someone to come out and cut your grass for you. Somebody that does the legwork pretty much. They're the ones that call the meetings. Well, they convene the meetings, they issue the notices. So they act on your behalf in managing the property. But as the owners of the units or the townhouses or whatever it is that you live in, you are the ones that have the power to vote at meetings, and you are the ones that have the power to bring things to the attention of the Strata committee and the Strata manager and get them to vote on that.
Yeah. So can the Strata manager, is the Strata manager always outsourced externally, or is it at times someone from the owners corporation? Can it be like that?
In most cases, depending on the size of the property, it is an external company, but we have seen cases where there are self-managed strata funds. That's usually where it's like like those two townhouses that are joined together, like duplexes. So you wouldn't need a strata manager. You and your neighbor can just sort the grass out. So it's in very limited cases, but it can happen.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd hate to be the one to manage all owners in an apartment block straight out.
It's hard work. It's hard work.
And just to clarify, so you mentioned everyone gets to vote at these meetings and whatnot. Obviously, they're voting regarding, decisions regarding maintenance and who they should use to cut grass or whatever. If there is a building of 4 or 5 and someone owns more than one unit in that building, do they get more than one vote?
They don't get more than one vote, but their vote becomes more based on the unit entitlement. So unit entitlement is what you own based on the size of your property. And that's how the strata determines what you pay in terms of your levies. So if the owners corporation sets a budget of 100,000 a year for, say, the admin fund, then you pay a portion of that based on your unit entitlement. So your unit entitlement is your voting power pretty much. So the bigger your unit entitlement, the bigger power you've got.
So it also depends on the size of the unit, and that kind of predicts how much you're going to be paying for strata. So if I live next door to someone that has a 40 square meter and I've got an 80 square meter or a 60 square meter, I'm paying more in levies.
That's right. Yeah. So those people that own penthouses, they're paying a lot more than the average person that's just living in a 2-bedroom home. Sorry,
I'm guessing that's because I'm using more water, more plumbing, more aircon. Is that
not just
behind it, or
no, not just that? It's because you're occupying more space of the actual strata plan itself.
And you said something interesting at the beginning in regards to out of that cubic space that you've purchased.
Yeah.
You don't own anything else besides that. But what about carports downstairs? Is that also something you own? Because I understand from a customer that's something they were given, and if they want an extra car space, they can request for one, but they don't actually own it.
Yeah, so it depends on what your strata plan says. In most cases, you own the unit plus the car space or the carport. But there are some cases where there is what's called an exclusive use bylaw. So if you don't have a car space, the owners corporation will give you a right to use a car space. It's not yours to keep. You just have a right to use it. It's still owned by the owners corporation. But if you do have a car space allocated to your strata plan, yes, you still own it, but you don't own the common property around it.
And you also said at the beginning, like, if there's a strata manager, like a horrible strata manager in place, if someone were to get in contact with you, they're also going to have to pay a fee for your legal fees to get that organized as well. So that's just an extra fee on top of the strata and the council and the water rates that people were looking to purchase. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because that podcast that we did maybe a week or 2 ago in regards to buying an apartment, the last podcast I think we did. And I think we're on the impression, I think KM, myself, and Mark, that we're not really fans of purchasing an apartment, especially when it's more investment, because it's so many fees and expenses that you're really not in control of. I can understand someone living in an apartment because they enjoy living in an apartment, owner occupied, something more understandable, but you've just gone through just a couple of points and it's just turned me off even more.
Well, the problem that we have is when we go through a contract with the client that's purchasing into a unit, they go through periods, what I call the life cycle of a exchange. The first exchange is I'm excited, I just put an offer down. The second period is they accepted my offer. Then the third period is okay, well, let's organize the strata report. Let's just see what you're paying in levies. Uh-oh, you're paying $2,000 in levies a quarter. That's just for your grass to be cut. That's just for insurance for the building. But you're also paying council and you're also paying water rates. So that excitement you have is now slowly going down because you're paying about a good $4,000 just in rates. So the problem that we have is a lot of first home buyers that can't get into the property market have to buy into strata. And while they think that they are saving in the short term, they actually are not in the long term, especially when the strata report comes back with defects and repairs that have to be undertaken and legal fees that have to be incurred to go to NCAT to sue the builder, to sue the developer who's now insolvent all of a sudden. So it can get quite messy, and unfortunately, a lot of people, they think that they are saving at first, but really they're not. So that's just one of the things that I have to let the client know is you need to be aware of X, Y, and Z. And the only way that we can tell is if we do our due diligence and we do the searches that from our end, which is first obtaining a strata report, and that will show us how healthy the balance is of the owner's corporation and whether there's any special levies that are likely to be struck anytime soon.
Yeah. And I think that leads to my next question, just from an existing customer. She purchased an apartment, and luckily for her solicitor, she actually picked up there was still going to be work to be done about maybe 2-3 months into her new purchase. Like 3 months she would have moved in, and she would have had to be putting up a certain amount to get a few things fixed around the apartment blocks, where she didn't feel like she needed to, because she just purchased the apartment. The damage that was done to the apartment block or whatever it may be is not her responsibility. Now, you can probably go on about this in a lot more detail and a bit more sophisticated, but from what I understood is she actually didn't have to pay any of that strata. She was actually exempt because the solicitor allowed her to do that, because she wasn't living there at the time of the damage that was done, the water damage, and she wasn't liable for that. Is that something that you're running in a lot as well, or?
Not in that particular case, but I've got a particular case that's happening now where one of my lot owners is actually an owner of a unit, and the building is not that old. It's about maybe 10-15 years old, but there's a lot of defects in it. So we're out of the defect period where we can go after the builder or the developer. So what has to happen is the owner's corporation has to take out a $2 million loan to fix the issue. And the issue is waterproofing in the planter boxes, similar to the example you've said. So all of a sudden, she not only has to pay $2,000 in levies, standard levies per quarter, she's now got to pay an extra $2,000 special levies per month just to cover that. And a lot of issues that the clients have is, well, it's not on my side, it's not on my property. Why should I have to pay for it? Why am I forced to pay for it? So the concept of ownership of strata is not really clear to a lot of clients out there. So that's why it's really important for lawyers, especially lawyers that are dealing with first home buyers, to explain to the client what you're actually buying. You're not just buying a penthouse, you're buying everything else around that penthouse that you are going to ultimately be responsible for later on.
Are there any positives to strata?
It depends. A lot of people.
The way you asked that question was like you're hoping there's going to be a positive.
Strata can get very political, especially for the strata committee, because they're obviously the ones that steer the ship the way they want. The positives is that it is cheaper upfront for a lot of buyers. Another positive is that it's readily available. Like, look around Sydney, how many apartment blocks are up? How many apartment blocks are going up? So there's so much demand and supply for them that it's become the norm now. It's become so popular. Whereas houses, there's just so much expenses involved in, you know, knocking down a house and building a house and getting into a building contract with a builder, and whether I trust this builder and how much is it going to cost me to change a light bulb. So there are pros and cons to everything. It just depends on the client and what they want to do. Some people want to live in a unit. They don't want to have to worry about cutting the grass every week or having someone, you know, come out and maintain their lawn for them. They've got that readily available. So it really depends on the client.
Yeah. Okay. So what would you say are some common pitfalls or mistakes that people make when purchasing property that has strata?
The common pitfalls that I've seen is that, one, they don't understand what they're buying. Two, they don't do a strata. They don't carry out a strata report. They think, oh, you know, the agent told me that the levies are $400 a quarter. That's okay. I can afford that. But really, the agent tells you what you want, what they want you to hear. So, with all my respect to agents out there, so that's the two most common pitfalls that we see. The third common pitfall is a lot of owners don't understand not just how strata works, but they also have to abide by what's called bylaws in a strata scheme. So bylaws regulate how you use the common property. So things like, can I have an animal in my unit? Things like, can I smoke in my unit? Where can I park? Can I use a visitor parking? Some bylaws are quite stringent, and if you don't abide by them, the strata manager can actually issue you with a penalty, with a bylaw breach notice. So it can get pretty serious, and it can lead to disputes down the track. So know what your bylaws say. If you're looking at living in a unit and you've got 5 cars, but your strata plan only gives you 2 car spaces, well, where are you going to put the rest of your cars? So do your homework first, understand the situation that you're in, understand why you want to move into this place, what's good about it. Forget the aesthetics and the materials and how nice it looks. What are you actually buying? And the role of the solicitor involved in this is to explain to the client not just what they're buying, but the physical location of things and whether their bylaws prohibit you or restrict you from doing things. And if you don't abide, what happens then?
Yeah, you sort of tied into my my follow-up question, which was going to be, what do you personally do when it, like, what is your role in this process? When do you get involved when it comes to strata? And you started to touch on it, but if you want to elaborate, when would someone get you involved when it comes to strata?
Yeah, so there's a few things that I do. Obviously, from a conveyancing perspective, because I am a property lawyer, I look through the contract. I advise the client of what to be aware of when going through the contract, just like a normal conveyance. But when it comes to strata, there is extra things that we look out for. And I know how bylaws work because I've drafted them and I am drafting them. So if there is a really strict bylaw and you don't like it, I'm probably one of the people that have put that in there for you. So that's one of my roles as well, is to prepare bylaws, is to go through the bylaws, prepare deeds of agreements between body corporates, and basically, yeah, just anything strata related, any disputes. So I've done some directions hearings as well in the past for a couple of strata managers, deeds of agreements between 2 body corporates, whether it's over a garage door or whether it's over an easement, writing letters of demand, writing letters to other side owners corporations in relation to trees. So pretty much anything strata related.
And it's guaranteed to go up every year, isn't it? The strata fee.
Yes, 99% of the time it does go up.
Is there I know every single place will be different, but is there a certain percentage or like a rule of thumb how much percent it goes up by every year, or is that negotiated internally or negotiated by the strata manager?
There's no really rule of thumb. It just depends on what the owners corporation is looking at doing in the future. So most owners corporation have what's called a sinking fund plan. So that shows them a projection of a plan in 10 years time of what they want to do. So if we're now at year 8 and we want to replace all the balustrades or something like that, well, we need to make sure that we've got enough funds in our sinking fund to be able to do that. So that's one of the things they take into play. But they have to be reasonable in the contributions that they set, and they have to be understanding with the lot owners on that, because otherwise the lot owners won't pay, and then the funds will be in deficit, which is a huge problem for body corporates.
So let's say I pay all my strata on time or anything like that, and then a problem comes up where we don't have enough money or we don't have enough funds in the sinking fund. I'm guessing, this is just my question, I'm guessing the strata manager or whoever's taking care of the strata at the time is going to have to ask for more money from lot owners. Is that something, or is there something insurance in the background that we're not aware of, or?
It depends on the issue that we are talking about. So if it's things like a waterproofing issue, 99% of time insurance doesn't cover waterproofing. So if it's not covered by insurance, well, okay, we now have to raise a special levy. It depends on the price of the works we've been quoted. If we've been quoted 50,000, okay, well, we can probably get away with a special levy. But if we've been quoted $2 million, we've got a problem here. We can't get the owners to pay $2 million. So what happens then is they enter into a loan with the Strata finance company to fund this project, for whether it's for repairs, whether it's for defects, and then the owners have to pay the contribution for the loan, just like a loan repayment, based on the unit entitlement.
So wait a minute. So the owners would have to go down on the loan, I'm guessing?
Yes.
Or,
owners corporation.
and let's say they sell the property later on, one of the owners wants to sell, the new buyer would have to be on board.
Yes.
Yes. We should have had Rania on the podcast the last week when we were doing this. We would just shut down all arguments in regards to apartments or houses.
Yes. I've had one where I was reviewing, and the capital works fund was in deficit by about $300,000. So obviously you can't have there's two funds. There's an admin fund and there's a capital works fund. Admin fund looks after your day-to-day expenses, things like Joey cutting the grass for you, insurance. Capital works is major works. So this particular client came to me and he said, I want to look into buying this property. Can you please check the report for me? I saw the $300,000 deficit and immediately I thought, we've got a problem here. Flicked through the pages and they had actually entered into a loan. And this guy was going to end up paying, I think it was $1,500 extra per quarter just for the loan on top of the levies. So I told him about that and he said, no, I'm getting out of this. I don't want this. So it does happen. And this is why I say, if you don't do your report and you don't do your searches beforehand, you just don't know whether you can afford this later on.
And this is really just giving me anxiety. So even if you were to buy a brand new apartment and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, and I think like most of us already know, anything can happen out of nowhere. Something can go wrong out of nowhere. Those lot owners or unit owners are liable whether it's in their control or not.
Again, the answer is it depends, but eventually they will have to fork out some money to come up with the difference, especially if the builder has become insolvent, which is so common these days. So I've got one now where my client has put down an offer on a property, contracts have been exchanged. The Strata report came back today. There's a defect in her building, and not just in her building, in her unit. So the unit is currently vacant, which means that she can't rent it out. So she can't rent it out, which means she's losing on money, and she can't move into it because it's uninhabitable due to the defect. So what happens then? So the lawyers are going to start commencing proceedings because the builder is insolvent, and they're going to have to try and find a way to get out of it with insurance. But in the meantime, who's paying for the lawyers, and who's paying for this poor girl that can't pay for her mortgage or can't get a tenant in there? So it's really, really important to get a Strata report before you sign anything.
Yeah, and if I agree. I mean, just these stories they're pretty scary stories, and we don't take investing lightly or purchasing a property lightly, but so many people don't really do any research and jump into things that they have no idea. Question, I forgot my question there. I was going to ask, it was just about that. So if we're in a strata and Fadi is like, no, I'm not going to pay, stuff you guys. He just refuses to pay.
After hearing that, yeah, stuff you guys.
Yeah.
What happens to Fadi?
You'll get debt collectors knocking at your door.
Yeah. So yeah, makes sense. And so I had another question. So yeah, if there's an investor that purchases an apartment or unit, whatever it is with a strata, are the investors, the purchasers, the ones who pay the strata, or do their tenants become the ones who pay the strata?
Pay the strata quarter levies, you mean?
Yeah.
No, it's the owner that pays the levies.
Yeah. Okay. So it doesn't get passed on to the tenants.
No.
Yeah.
It's just like council and water rates.
Yeah. So I mean, it seems pretty negative. I mean, I'm sure there are some positive reasons.
There are some issues that clients also tend to overlook, especially where you're buying a strata property that has a loan in place. So if there is a loan in place, they need to think about how this is going to affect their borrowing capacity as well. And I'm not sure how it is in the broking world, but there are some banks that really hone in on this, and they will decline the client a loan because they know that the client won't be able to service it due to this extra loan that they're now part of. Whether they like it or don't like it, they're just part of it. So that's another thing.
It's not even that. When the bank sees that they're in a group, they've got a loan with a group of people, some lenders will say, well, the customer is liable for the whole amount.
Yeah.
Let's say for the 2 million, the customer would have to be able to service the $2 million plus whatever they want to purchase next. There's only a few. Cam is laughing because we've had a case like this recently. There's only a few lenders, maybe one or two lenders, they'll do something called a common debt reducer. And even then, it's a bit of a fight to get that over the line, where they'll only take into account what the customer owes.
Yeah.
That's the scary thing. Like, and in regards from an investor's point of view, I just think it's a bad idea. Because all the points you've just made in this podcast in regards to, the sinking fund, the owner's fund, anything that were to go wrong, they're going to be liable for it either way, even if they've got a tenant in there or not. And it's not like they can just increase the rent.
Unless they're using it to heavily negative gear their investment, then that's the only way that I could see it working as an investment.
It's so unpredictable, but with all the fees and expenses, anything were to come up, the only thing, I think if we're looking for a positive in regards to purchasing apartments, if someone actually loves or wants to live in an apartment, which I have customers that bought apartments like, man, I have no front yard, I've got no backyard, I've got no maintenance. I go back home, I've got like an 80-meter square that I have to clean, which I can clean every day. It's not really a problem. I think because I really want to grab onto some sort of positive, because I like to have, try to find the positive in everything. But from an investor's point of view, it's just, man, I don't know. Like I wouldn't do it. I personally wouldn't do it. It's just too unpredictable for me.
There are a lot of problems, especially in larger complexes, and people pick on anything these days more than ever. Like, I could smell Joe smoking from his building and I can't stand it. I'm going to go raise a complaint now. And it's just little petty things that become really big things, and then they lead to costs and costs and costs. Like, who cares? Just live in peace.
Yeah,
that's insane.
I think these are really good points, because I think a lot of people don't know about strata, and it's interesting to see how it can be quite volatile, unpredictable, and can add to your cost base, and just there's some on the extreme side of it can be very painful to someone. Just quickly a glossary term question. Body corporate, same thing as strata?
Body corporate is same thing as owner's corporation.
Yeah.
Body corporate is a group of people that own the strata.
Yeah. Cool. I don't actually have any other questions. Fadi, do you have any other questions regarding?
One last question, I swear, because this is just blowing my mind. Honestly, it's blowing my mind, all this. Is there ever going to be a scenario where you've lived in an apartment block, let's say for the 30 years that you've owned the loan and you've paid off your home loan? Is there ever a scenario where there no longer needs to be work done to the apartment? It's fine as it is. It's just maintenance.
Yeah, if you buy really old units.
Yeah?
Really old units, yeah.
Oh, there's your positive, KM.
Yeah.
There you go. If you've lived in the apartment for like 30 years,
Yeah.
and they've done all the works and plans they've ever wanted, and like Rania was saying, there's not going to be a 10-year plan. They want to get all this stuff done up to 10 years. So after that 10-year plan, or whether 20 or 30 years, it's just basically maintenance.
Yeah, there's the older units, especially because building materials now aren't what they were 20, 30 years ago. So the older units are more stable. They're more reliable, especially when you've got units that are only like in a part of a three level. I used to live in one, and if I was to buy in Strata, that's what I would buy in, because they've been around that long that it's good. Look at Mascot Towers. Mascot Towers was fairly new, and all these defects have come about. So yes, they look good from the outside, but when you're inside, it's not that great.
So you like, so buy an older apartment, renovate the inside because it's better built. And you make a good point, because you look at these older apartments, how long they've been around for, and all these new apartment blocks, there's just problem after problem after problem. So, and like you said, they're going up at such a fast rate. So I don't think there's so much duty of care or care put into as much as it was 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, there's a problem, or there's a problem that's about to happen when the builder is insolvent. So that's your first that's your first sign not to go ahead.
This has been my favorite point of the entire episode, and you probably saw me smiling like an idiot in the corner, and because it just everything that we believe in, and it's just been reinforced. If you are going to invest in an apartment, the only time we really would look at it is if it's got some scarcity value, and if it's in a low density, sort of like you mentioned, a 2-3 levels with 2 or 3 units per level, something small, and something that's been around, that stood the test of time. And something we say a million times on this podcast is we don't buy brand new, we don't buy off the plan, and there's some people out there that question us about it and have been whispering behind our backs about buying brand new and whatnot. But it's always good to get another expert on our side on touch that stuff.
I get tempted to sometimes knocking down and rebuilding my house, but then I think, no, am I sane? I deal with these issues day in, day out, and I'm going to go and do the same thing to myself. So no, I would never go brand new. I'd probably go for something that's about 10, 15 years old, and you can just renovate it. But just make sure you get a bylaw before you do that. So call me for a bylaw.
And get a builder from 20, 30 years ago. A builder with 20, 30 years experience, not these new generation. Yes.
Get someone reliable.
Yeah, we're going to snip that part up, and I'm going to blast that all over social media, and maybe someone
that's going to be on all the reels.
If the person knows who they are, they'll know who they are. Anyway, thank you so much, Rania. This was actually a very informative episode, and like, let's be real, Strata's pretty boring, but it was pretty interesting conversation, and I think everyone would have learned a lot from that conversation. If Rania, if someone wants to get in contact with you to maybe they're looking at buying Strata or non-Strata, or just have questions or want to get in touch, how could someone get in touch with you?
Well, they can call me. My number is 0404 952 702. I've also got my own website, www.rslawgroup.au. Just Google me. I'm everywhere.
Awesome. We'll have our contacts on the post as well.
Thank you.
We'll put your details in the show notes as well. All right, beautiful. Thank you so much,
Thank you, guys.
Rania, for joining us and giving us your time. And it was an awesome episode. I'm sure we'll have you on again. And don't buy a brand new apartment.
I'm buying Strata. Thanks,
Alright.
guys.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
No worries. See you.
Bye.
Bye.